Hey guys, so quick update, I'm single now. Single and bored. So of course, as most gay men, after months of crying and trying to get over it, I matured enough to step into Grindr, and oh my god. Well, actually not oh my god, because everyone was quite adequate and everyone's self-isolating, so that's good. But there are a lot of catfishes on Grindr. People just clearly straight up trying to lie to you, or people who want to entertain themselves and are bored and are ready to engage in all sorts of conversations just to pass the time, or as Grindr community likes to call them, time wasters. And it's all good when you're just there for fun or trying to find a hookup or trying to find a boyfriend, which isn't a good idea, trust me, I've learned from experience. But if you want to do any of those things, you better avoid these people. So I decided to come up with a list of things you should kind of go through when you're talking to people so that you avoid fake profiles, save yourself some time, save yourself some nerves, and save yourself some of those no-show-up Grindr dates. You're welcome. I have to clarify before we get into it though, although there will be some things that I will talk about that have not been talked about before, I have to be honest, I will be talking about some basic things, because if there is a person like an 18, 19-year-old trying to get into Grindr, I have to explain things to them, okay? I have to be like, don't talk to these people or avoid these people, which might be pretty obvious for people who have been using Grindr for 10 years. So just bear with me, okay? So the number one thing I wanted to talk about, I'm just gonna put a small picture over here on this side of the screen. What do you see? I'm asking you, what do you see? Exactly. Nothing. It's a profile without a picture. And oh my god, Sasha, isn't it obvious that you shouldn't talk to people with no profile picture because they might be catfishing you, or they might pretend to be someone they're not? No, apparently it isn't. I've seen so many people talk to pictureless profiles, which... Come on, guys. Think about it this way. If someone's really trying to find a relationship, if someone's really trying to hook up, if someone really wants the attention, if someone's on Grindr to talk to other people in the first place, right, which is why you go on there, or exchange dick pics, doesn't matter. Why would a person avoid having a picture of themselves that would catch attention to their profile? It doesn't matter what age they are, you know, whether you're 20, whether you're 70, it doesn't matter. You would want to have a profile pic, because otherwise no one's gonna message you. Because why would they message a blank profile? And I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna be like, oh Sasha, but don't they like send you the picture straight after they say hey? And yeah, maybe, but how do you know it's really them? The problem is, they could be using a picture of just some random guy and not want other people to know about it, or want to message with that picture to a lot of people, so that's why they do it in private, in direct messages. So please try not to message blank profiles, or try to avoid, steer clear of them altogether. And that, by the way, includes any picture without a face. I know you can see a sexy body and be like, oh, I'm gonna message him, or like, oh, I'm gonna reply to him, but the only time I can sort of understand when this is happening is when you're like in a small town, and when you're in a village and you just simply have no one on Grindr to talk to or to meet up with. That I can understand. But if you're in a city like me, or any town really with population more than 50,000 people, you should be ashamed of yourself. Just don't do it. Kind of a similar thing to a no profile pic situation, blank profiles. The only thing I'll say with that is I had a very unfortunate accident, which I've already talked about in one of my videos, which you can watch over there in the corner. Just click on info card, but make sure you have annotations turned on, because otherwise the info card is not going to be there. In that video, I have talked about a guy who I've met up with, who misled me into thinking he was this hot guy, hot jock, and realistically he wasn't. The way he was taking pictures seemed as if he was this sexy toned guy, but realistically he was just trying to scam me. He was quite fat, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with, but I even said in my profile, sorry guys, I'm into slim and toned and muscly guys, not really into people of bigger sizes. Just how it is, just my preference, sorry. Which I think is nothing wrong with putting things that way. But regardless, he messaged me and we talked, and I just didn't really think about asking like a full body picture. He was just sending me like cropped pictures, like this sort of cropped, and it just seemed like he was okay because his face under certain angles was not looking big, but indeed he was, and I was really disappointed about that, and that was such a waste of time. I felt like I wasted my entire evening, and we also went to like quite an expensive restaurant, and I felt like I wasted money because he didn't even pay, which again, I usually prefer to pay for myself, but when you kind of lied and when you kind of misled me into thinking that you're this hot jock, at least you would think that he would try to compensate for it. He didn't. So yeah, if a profile doesn't have a profile pic, or if it's a blank profile, generally if it doesn't have any information on it and the guy doesn't send like full-on pictures of himself, I would genuinely try to steer clear. Number 3, no social media attached. Now I know as well some people are gonna have a problem with it because some people would be like, well, I'm not putting my Instagram for those crazy people out there, or I'm not putting Twitter for those crazy people out there. But generally, if a profile is empty as it is, if it doesn't have a profile pic, usually it wouldn't have social media on it. So this would be kind of like an additional filter to what we have already covered, where a lot of young guys that I would sort of be able to definitely tell that they're real, they would link their Instagram in their profile or their Twitter in their profile, which is great because realistically you only have 5 pictures on Grindr that you can download, and that feature started quite recently as well from what I know. I haven't been on Grindr for 2 years, but let's call in the last 2 years being pretty recent. Before that you could only upload 1 picture, and so you wouldn't really have the ability to show yourself properly. So a lot of the times people would link their social media in the profile. When I was linking my Instagram profile on Grindr, people were definitely checking me out a lot more, and people were like, oh, do you have my pictures? And I'm like, oh, you mean the ones that are not on Instagram? And they were like, oh, sorry, didn't see that. And they would be like, oh, damn, you hot. Or like, oh, damn, sorry, not for me. That never happened, luckily. But yeah, so even if they have a profile pic and even if they have some information about themselves online on their Grindr profile, very often when you ask them for social media, especially if you're about to meet with someone and you want to know where their Instagram is, what their Twitter is, what their phone number is, so you can get in contact with them, if they don't give you that, especially before the hookup or the meetup, that's kind of weird because they themselves would want to make sure that you are reachable, and sometimes Grindr plays out. It happened a lot of times when I was using it as well, where the messages just wouldn't send or something was glitching. So you always want to talk to people who have social media attached to their profile. This is just a way of identifying a person. And again, if a person is discreet, I can understand that, but I personally wouldn't risk meeting with that person because you have no idea who they are in real life. For what you know, the next morning your friends and family would be reading an article on Queerty about another guy who met up with a maniac on Grindr and got chopped into pieces and sent down the river or whatever. Now, from that, I've had a few situations where people would not give me their social media profile. They would give me a lot of pictures of themselves, but they would not give me social media profile, but they would say, hey, well, we can talk on Snapchat. Now, of course, Snapchat is also a social media, but oftentimes you just have bitmojis there. You don't really have profile pictures as such. And especially if you go to their Snapchat profile, if you see that they don't have enough points on their profile for you to be like, oh yeah, they're pretty real because they've spoken to a lot of people. But for example, me, I have installed Snapchat quite recently and I don't have many of those interaction points. So for me, the way I would sort of think about it, okay, well, let's communicate in images. If you want to do Snapchat, that's fine. Let's just communicate in images to make sure that you are who you say you are. So even if after all those filters that you already went through, you still think that a guy might be still a bit weird or something might not be quite right, if you have this gut feeling in you, you can also reverse Google Images. So if you go to Google Images, and I will leave the link in the description for that, you will be able to search for the image that he is sending you. And if you find a profile with some other dude that he's claiming to be and he isn't, then obviously that is a red flag. I mean, why would you even want to meet with a fake person who didn't even bother to look for proper pictures that wouldn't be able to be found? I'm telling you, man, some catfishers just don't have fantasy and they don't have any considerations for the fact that people can just reverse Google the image. It drives me nuts when people are lazy like that. Speaking of catfisher images, by the way, there are a lot of times where they get so lazy that you can easily expose them. For example, the pictures themselves. A good idea is to look at the sockets. Maybe if they're somewhere in the background, the electric sockets. So if you're in the UK and the guy claims he's from London, you can look at the backgrounds of his pictures. And sometimes I've actually found that some of the plug sockets would be American. And, you know, how can you be living in London and how can you be living in America at the same time? Now, of course, they'd be able to be like, well, I've just traveled to America, I've taken that picture there. But that is just something to be aware of, okay? Just check, just double check. Also, quite an obvious one, if they have palms or some unusual trees or grass or like buildings for your area specifically where you live, that could easily be a red flag as well. Because if you're in Canada, it's very unlikely that you'll be finding any palm trees there at all. And finally, my friend, the thing I wanted to mention is, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Now, I already hear you be like, ooh, it's such a cliche phrase. Ooh, these are like obvious tips. Listen, these tips are not obvious. You know why? Because common sense doesn't mean common practice. That is the problem with these things. We are guys, and oftentimes our heads down there make us do things that our heads up here wouldn't necessarily let us do. I'm just here to remind you of all of these things, and it's just so important to adhere to them. Please, your safety is way more important than just some Grindr hookup or meeting up with someone. But you have to be realistic about the guy's intentions. You have to be realistic about, okay, well, are they this beautiful muscly man who clearly shouldn't be on Grindr at this point and who should have quite a few fuck buddies himself? So yeah, guys, these are just some simple tips, really. Nothing complicated, but it's more about practicing them. It's more about using them and remembering that your personal safety is more important than anything else. So make sure you talk to profiles with pictures. Make sure you talk to profiles that are filled out properly, that have some basic information on them. And if you're sending nudes, or especially if you're going out with that guy, if you're doing a hookup or if you're doing something else, just make sure you have them on social media, or at least have their phone number and know their name. Okay, well, I've been filming this video for half an hour. It's already way too long for me. Stay safe, use these tips. I'm sure they will be useful. Follow my Instagram for my day-to-day updates. The link will be in the description of the video, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.